Honorable distinguished speaker of today's program, Sri Aakar Patel ji, other eminent personalities in the program, I would like to take a little bit of time to introduce Sri Aakar Patel Garu, a brief introduction. And as we all know, that Aakar Patel ji is a famous journalist, rights activist, and author. He had his schooling at Sir J.J. English School, Surat, Gujarat, and Metas Adventist School, Surat. He did his graduation from the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda. He started his career of journalism when he joined the Asian Age as a trainee sub-editor. Later, he became the editor of Mumbai edition of the Asian Age. He also worked with the Deccan Chronicle, Dorling Kindersley, and Midday Multimedia Limited. He co-authored The Rights and Wrongs, a report on the 2002 Gujarat riots by the Editors Guild. He was the editor-in-chief for a Gujarati newspaper, Divya Bhaskar. Aakar is also known for his translations with proficiency in Gujarati, Hindi, English, and Urdu. Aakar Patel's works include Our Hindu Rashtra, in which he expels the dangerous myth that citizens and country become holy when governance is mixed with religion. He emphasizes that no country has flourished adopting theocratic form of government. This book is also available in Telugu with Mana Haindava Rajyam as its title. He wrote another book, Price of the Modi Years, in which he talked about Modi's re-election in 2019, the magnetism of Modi, and Modi's management. The most essential feature of an activist is fearlessness. And Amnesty South Asia Director Biraj Patnaik says, and Patel had that. He had the ability to speak truth to power. Consequently, Patel worked as Director, Amnesty International India from 2015 to 2019. Aakar has been a rights activist who refuses to budge even a bit, even in the present times of persecution and adversities. Fiza Jha, a columnist of the print magazine, writes, Aakar Patel is an activist who refuses to turn a blind eye to the state's excesses and does not mince words. At this juncture, sir, we are humbled with your kind acceptance of our invitation for your virtual presence at Professor Jayashankar's 11th memorial lecture by you on the topic Indian Democracy at 75. We are confident that at this crucial, critical juncture the nation is going through, we will be able to draw strength, resist all types of repression and oppression, and hope for the bright dawn through your message. We welcome you, sir, with a wholeheartedness. We welcome Sri Aakar Patel ji to deliver the 11th memorial lecture of Professor Jayashankar. Aakar Patel ji.
Thank you very much to the Vedika. Thank you to all of you who have gathered. I would like to apologize for not having been with you earlier. I was asked to speak a few weeks ago. I had a problem and I could not come to Hyderabad. Thank you nonetheless for being patient with me and for giving me this time. I want to talk about three of my books without necessarily going into their content. I think that we should begin by trying to assess where we are now. After 75 years of independence, where does India stand? Where do Indians stand? The second thing that we can look at after that is, what does the future hold for us in the next 25 years, till 2047? And I'd like to begin by talking about something that is not necessarily understood when we talk about what is called Hindu Rashtra. So I think we are at an important moment in our history where for the first time, a political party that controls the union government has an ideology which is slightly different from that in the Constitution. So the Constitution of India promotes a pluralism. We also use the word secular, but what it means essentially is that the belief is that India is a united nation. And why it is united is because of the fact that its people are not separated. They are all the same. whether you speak a different language, whether you look different, whether your religion is different, whether your diet is different, whether your gender is different or your caste is different. There is a slight difference between that framework and what the BJP has brought. The BJP has a specific ideology which it calls Hindutva, on which its own ideologues have spoken and written. And we should try and first understand what it is that this ideology means for us in the 75th year of our independence and where it will take us. So I would like to present what the possibilities are within what the Hindutva ideology can do. And let's look at Nepal, which is the only other Hindu Rashtra that we can think of. Till 2008, the constitution of Nepal said that it was a Hindu Rashtra. And the reason why Nepal called itself a Hindu Rashtra was that the executive authority, the leader of the country, could only be from the Kshatriya caste. So what they call Kshetri in Nepal. And so you had a king who was born a Kshatriya, and he was the only one entitled by birth to be able to lead the country. The second important thing that they had, which was also taken from the Hindu scripture, was that in his court, in this king's court, there would be a Mool Purohit, a Brahmin, who would advise the king on how to go about the business of managing the kingdom. These were the only two things from the Hindu scripture that the Nepali state had. If we look at the other parts of our texts, including the Manusmriti, which also say that the Kshatriya should be ruling and the Brahmin should be giving advice, but it goes further and says that the Shudra should not be entitled to education, that a large part of the population becomes Malech and they cannot merge and mix with the rest of it. That is not really possible to do in the 21st century. It wasn't possible to do for Nepal either. So for Nepal, the Hindu Rashtra element was limited to just these two things, that there would be a Kshatriya king and that he would be given advice by a Brahmin. On our other border, we have Pakistan, which also tried to build a modern state on the basis of religion. So when Jinnah died and Liaquat Ali Khan, who was the first Prime Minister of Pakistan, he spoke to the Constituent Assembly. He told them that this was just a couple of years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki had happened. So Liaquat said that the modern scientific world had run in front of the moral part of man. And what Pakistan would do by making an Islamic democracy is that they would bring together this modern element with the state and try and improve man. The way that they would try and do that would be to focus mostly on Muslims. So the Islamic State of Pakistan and its laws would not target the minorities so much as the Muslims. They would help the Muslims to become better Muslims. And the difficulty was that Pakistan and Bangladesh, just like India, for many decades into the 1940s and 50s, and even today, are governed by a set of laws that were given to us by the British in the 19th century, specifically the Indian Penal Code, which came from Macaulay. So if we go to Karachi, or if we go to Peshawar, if we go to Dhaka, if we go to Lahore, and we say Section 144, or we say 302, or we say 420, they know what that means because it's the same set of laws. Pakistan tried to change this and said, okay, we will try and Islamize this. We'll try and make the laws better so that our Muslims become better Muslims. For 10 years after 1947, they could not do anything. So there were several changes in their leadership. They were unable to come to an agreement on how it is that Pakistan would be governed. And then the military took over. After this, the first significant changes came in their constitution. The first was, this came under Ayub Khan, that no non-Muslim could become the president of Pakistan. So this came in the 60s. This, for the first time, it was decided that the Islamic law would not only try and improve Muslims, but it would also address non-Muslims. So in the 60s, non-Muslim Pakistanis were told that they could not become the president of the state. In the 70s, under Bhutto, this law was extended to the Prime Minister's post. So by law, non-Muslim Pakistanis, whether they were Hindus, whether they were Christians, they could not aspire to the post of either president or prime minister, because by law, they were banned from doing this. Pakistan also tried to improve what it thought it could do in the lives of their Muslims. So for instance, they said, okay, we are going to enforce fasting during Ramzan. Now, South Asia is a part of the world where Muslims fast in any case. You don't need to enforce this. But Pakistan felt that if all the Muslims fasted, then God would send blessings, and then a nation would become better. So the enforcement came. The problem was that there were several Muslim restaurant owners who complained that they were not able to get business during the day. Non-Muslims were targeted because in Pakistan, just like in India, the minorities don't look physically very different from the majority community. So they were targeted, they were humiliated, beaten up, because they were seen to be eating during the fast. Pakistan also tried to enforce zakat, which is the tithe that is paid by Muslims to the state. And they did this by saying, okay, during the month of Ramzan, we will try and debit 2.5% from all of the fixed deposit accounts that are held by Muslims. Two things happened. One is that the Shias of Pakistan had a very strong objection, because they were already giving money as zakat to their leadership, the Shia clergy. So Ziaul Haq in the 80s had to exempt the Shia from paying this tithe. The other thing that happened is that Sunnis began withdrawing the money out of the fixed deposit just before the date of Ramzan. So the state was not able to collect the money that it was able to collect. And it turned out that this scheme was a failure. Similarly, they tried to enforce Islamic laws such as a prohibition on drinking, which they were not able to do fully. Today, you can legally buy alcohol in Karachi, but you cannot buy it in Gujarat. Zia also introduced punishments which were different from the IPC. So he introduced for drinking lashes. So you would tie the person to the post and you would whip the person 80 times. The punishment for theft was the amputation of the hand at the wrist. So your hand would be cut off. And if you were found guilty of theft a second time, then your leg would be cut off as well. So Pakistan actually trained a series of surgeons to try and do this surgery. The problem was that all the judges were trained in common law like ours. And they refused, they could not actually apply these punishments. So though Pakistan has a law which says that for theft, you can cut off arm and leg. That has never actually been applied. Nobody in the history of Pakistan has lost their hand or their foot because of theft. And still the same rules that we call the Indian Penal Code, they also apply to Pakistan. So it didn't work out for them, but they tried very hard to see whether they could change laws and make the Muslims better, make the state more noble, and try and improve the country in that way. It did not happen. Economically, they tried to look at it as well. And the Supreme Court of Pakistan's Sharia bench has said, the last time this was said was about 20 years ago, that interest is haram and should be removed from the economy. And so there was an order from the bench which said that banks should stop paying interest. This would, of course, collapse the economy if it were implemented. So it was not actually implemented. Today in Pakistan, interest is called share of profit. So the same thing continues. Banks give out interest to their on their fixed deposits, but instead of them calling it interest, it's called a profit. The last thing on this is that under Musharraf, a lot of the laws were reversed and were brought out of Sharia back into the penal code. So one of the laws on rape, which was taken from an Islamic injunction, said that if a woman could not prove that she had male witnesses to her being raped, then she would be charged with fornication. And many, many Pakistani women were jailed because they could obviously not prove that they had witnesses to their rape. So Musharraf reversed that. This is also about 20 years ago. And it came back into the penal code. Today, the law more or less resembles the same law that we have, and we have had since Macaulay in the 1860s. So it turned out to be a failure that Pakistan tried, just like Nepal tried, to do something different with the modern state. But there was no ability, there was no capacity to find something within the religion that could lead them into that new path. Because to my mind, there is no such thing. In the modern world, if you look at India's constitution, the thing that strikes you the most is how simple and basic and direct it is. It is just saying the things that any constitution should say. All people are equal. Anybody can become prime minister. Anybody can become president. Anybody can contest an election. Everybody has the right to vote. Laws which we inherited from the British have continued because they work, because of the fact that for the most part, the system, the judiciary works. It is slow, but it is functional. And so there is no reason for it to be altered. Now let us come to the fact that we are told that there is a departure, there is a new India. And in this new India, some of us feel that there is talk of a Hindu Rashtra, which is based on what it is that the BJP's ideology is. And we should look at what that ideology says. The first thing is that if you look at the texts written by Golwalkar and Deendayal Upadhyay, firstly, they did not write anything. They only give speeches. So both Deendayal Upadhyay's book and Golwalkar's book, Bunch of Thoughts, are not written words. They are just a collection of speeches that they gave. In Deendayal Upadhyay's case, he gave a series of speeches in the mid-60s. And in the case of Guru Golwalkar, it's the speeches that he gave through the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s when he died. So there is no written text. But what we are told in basic terms is that minorities are the enemy of the country. There is no specific citation about why or how. It is just assumed that those people who are born Hindu are loyal and are Indian. Those people who are not born Hindu are not loyal and they cannot be considered Indian. How can we extend this thinking into the state? How can the BJP take this ideology of theirs on minorities? Because it's a minority specific ideology. Hindutva does not say anything about Dalits, does not say anything about Adivasis. So if there were, just like Pakistan tried to focus on Muslims, if we were to say that can Hindutva focus on Dalits and on Adivasis, perhaps it can. Maybe, for instance, it can extend reservations into the private sector. But it does not do that. None of the Hindutva program is aimed at Hindus. It is aimed essentially at minorities. Given that, what can be done by the state? The one thing that can be done is exclude. So that is what we have done. Today in India, there is no Muslim chief minister anywhere in India. The BJP does not have a single Muslim Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha MP. It did not have any Muslim Lok Sabha MP in the last Lok Sabha either, when they had 282 seats. There is no Muslim minister in the Union cabinet today for the first time after 1947. The question is, to what end are we doing this exclusion? What will it produce? Pakistan wanted the blessings because it would try and make Muslims better. Nepal tried to enforce the Manusmriti because they felt that that was the Hindu way of running a state. Both failed. What will we gain by excluding Muslims? There is no theoretical framework within which the BJP operates. So my view, having looked at this, is that from here on, from over the next few years, perhaps over the next couple of decades, given the fact that the BJP is and will remain the dominant force in politics in northern India, we will see more of the same. There is also the reference to the laws that they have brought after 2014, and we'll talk about them slightly later. The second thing that the Hindutva ideology tells us is that it does not like federalism. So Deendayal Upadhyay wanted the states abolished because he felt that the idea of a Tamil Mata and a Banga Mata and a Gujarat Mata was actually ridiculous. And he only wanted one legislature in Delhi, and he only wanted one Bharat Mata, and he did not want any states. What would connect that one legislature in Delhi to the village in Telangana or in Bengal or in Gujarat, he did not tell us that, because that was left to somebody else. His primary concern was that Bharat Mata should be indivisible, that there should not be any states. This also is not possible. We have seen some attempt by the union government under the BJP to centralize power in a way that has not happened before, particularly after GST, where the states have lost more or less the authority to raise their own revenue. And I foresee a set of problems there. But just like on the religious side, the Hindu Rashtra cannot really be implemented because there is no scope, there is no way to go forward except for exclusion of minorities. On the side of federalism also, there is no option, because the sense of people in Telangana feeling a sense of pride in their region, and in Tamil Nadu or in Gujarat or in Kerala is real, and it's not easy for somebody at the center to enforce that. So just like the fact that the laws will remain unchanged and we bumble along on the same constitution that we have had, on federalism also, I don't foresee too much of a change. In fact, I foresee a slight pushback. Let me turn now to another aspect of where we are today at 75 and where it is that we will see ourselves in about 25 years from now. One fairly good indicator of where we are going can be provided by data that we have generated over the last 75 years. For instance, if we look at per capita income in India, the average has been about 12 years that we double our per capita income. What that means is, today we are at $2,200 nominal US dollars in per capita income. So each Indian, if you look at total GDP, the contribution of each Indian is about $2,200, about ₹1.5 lakh per year. This has been doubling at the rate of 12 years consistently. So if you look at in 2009, we were at $1,100. And if you look at 1960, we would have been at about $80. So it's a doubling every 12 years. At this rate, where will we be in 2047? So we have 25 years, we will double our income twice. So from 2,200, we will first go to 4,400. And then we will double it again after 12 years, and we will go to $8,800, $8,800 per capita in or around 2047, which is when, according to the Prime Minister, the Amrit Kal phase of our history will end. What does $8,800 mean in 2047? Firstly, it is less than what China has today. So today's China's per capita GDP is $12,500. So we are about 1/6 the size of China in terms of the economy. And these are all government figures. There is no dispute in them. We are not very far behind Bangladesh, but Bangladesh has gone in front of us. We should accept that in the last few years, after Mr. Modi has taken power, there has been a slowdown in the economy, particularly between January 2018 and March 2020, just before the pandemic hit. For 9 quarters, we had a sequential slowdown in GDP growth. We don't know why that happened, because these things are not discussed in India openly anymore. If we are at $8,800 per capita GDP in 2047, what does that by itself mean? So we should look at if we think that we are going to become developed, as the Prime Minister said in his Red Fort speech, that one of the goals of the Amrit Kal phase was that we would become a developed country over the next 25 years. What does developed country mean? So there is no real definition. But if we look at what other countries have done in terms of per capita income, we can see that Korea has $35,000 per capita income. Japan has about $40,000. The UK has about $50,000. Singapore and the US have about $70,000 per capita. So if we are at $8,800 in 2047, we will not be a developed country. We will not even be halfway to a developed country. We'll be very far from a developed country. The other problem is that within India, the disparity between those that we call middle class, but are actually an elite, and those that are poor is very vast. So we have a smaller economy than Germany, but we have more billionaires than Germany. So the concentration of wealth in the hands of a very few is more pronounced in India than it is in any other part of the world that we can think of, especially in the developing world. So even if we have $8,800 in 2047, which is nowhere near what a developed country is, even then, for the majority of Indians, the problem will not be so much that there is a per capita income of that level, but the fact that their lives have not changed that much. One thing that will tell us that is that today in India, 60% of the population, 80 crore people, which is 800 million people, which is the entire population of Europe, has to queue up every month for 5 kilos of rice or wheat and 1 kilo of dal, because they cannot afford to run their lives without the assistance of the state. And with this level of poverty, and we also have the two richest people in Asia. So 2 Indians are the richest Asians, but we also have 60% of the population which has to queue up for 6 kilos of free grain and dal. This is not sustainable. And I don't see over the next 25 years the same sort of stability in the economy that we have had in the past 75. That we are coming to a place, we are coming to a position where there will be a problem which will be articulated by large parts of the population, which is mostly the poor, that they cannot abide by this kind of unequal system. What are the things that tell us that this will not improve? So, for instance, we are told that GST collections are improving or something else is happening. Some data, and we can look at only what the government data says to show where we are. So, 5 crore more Indians had jobs in 2014 than have jobs today. And this has been the case before the pandemic as well. So what is called the labor force participation rate, which is the number of people who are more than 15 years, who are either working or looking for work, has been consistently falling in India. So the number of people who have work of any sort is about 40 crore. And that is less than the 45 crore people who had worked in 2014. Well, one reason for this is that the manufacturing sector has been harmed substantially since 2014. So data tells us that, and again, this is government data, that the share of manufacturing in GDP, which was over 16% in 2014, has gone down to 13%. It went up slightly during COVID because services was hit, hotels, airlines, and so on. But the fact is that there is a 3% drop in manufacturing share, which is manufacturing is what you want, because you can get jobs where people are not very highly skilled, but it's a formal job. And for instance, Bangladesh and Vietnam have grown the manufacturing share of GDP in the same period. So it was possible to do, but we were not able to do it. And there are two sets of data on jobs. One is from the private company CMI, which says that we have a labor force participation rate of 40, and the government's periodic labor force surveys, which also suggests that the number is similar, that the government also includes 17% of people who are called unpaid household workers. So these are people who are at home, maybe they're a housewife and they're not getting a salary, but the government includes them in their list of workers. Unemployment, according to a government survey, went to an all-time high of more than 6% in 2018. So there was a survey which just before the 2019 elections were held, the government had a survey which was carried by the Business Standard newspaper. And then Niti Aayog came out and said that this is not a believable survey. It was the government's own survey. But after the 2019 election results were out, then the survey was released without any change. And what that survey tells us is that unemployment in India used to be between 2 and 3% from the time that we have begun calculating it. Suddenly it went to 6% in the survey of 2018, and it has remained there in the 4 years since. So even today, the unemployment is between 7 and 8% consistently. It has not gone down. So you have a very small part of the population that is either working or looking for work, which is the labor force participation rate. And within that very small part of the population that is looking for work or is working, the number of people who don't have jobs has become is at an all-time high. Why? The simple answer is that there are no jobs in India, that people are not investing in factories, that they are not investing at the level that they should in services. And this will remain the case because we do not see investments not only are not going up, they're going down. So the investment rate in India has been in decline since 2014. This is not a secret either. This is also from government data. So how is it that all these crores of people who at the moment don't have work or don't have proper work will get jobs, will get security, will have a future? We don't know because the government does not talk about this. There is there are some other indicators that tell us that something is wrong dramatically with the Indian economy. So one of these is once again a government survey, which was in 2018. Once again, it was published in Business Standard. Once again, it was discredited by Niti Aayog. And the former chief economic advisor, Krishnamurti Subramaniam, requested the government to release the survey, but it has not. What it says is something quite remarkable, that Indians were spending less in 2018, including on food items, than they were in 2012. So not only had the economy not grown, the economy had actually shrunk if you saw what is called the consumption. So Indians are spending less money. 55% of the GDP of India is consumption, and this is the largest part of the GDP, and this is in decline according to government data. As I said, though people from within the government wanted the survey released, the survey has not yet been released. It was leaked to a newspaper which carried it. But if it is correct, and there is no reason to disbelieve a government survey, we are in deeper trouble than we think we are. Some of that data is corroborated by what we are seeing in these days. So fast-moving consumer goods, FMCG, this is companies like Hindustan Lever that sell biscuits, soap, shampoo, detergent, noodles. They are saying that volume consumption is lower than it was in the last year, which means that if Indians bought 100 grams worth of biscuits in 2021, they were buying 95 grams or 96 grams in 2022. This is not the sign of a growing economy. This is a very problematic space. The Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, which is all of the car and two-wheeler manufacturers and the commercial vehicle and the three-wheeler manufacturers, they say that there is in April 2020, they released a paper which said that, the paper was released last year. The data was still April 2020. They said that India was going through, the automobile sector was going through, and these are their words, a structural, deep and long-term slowdown. And they said they did not know why this was. They asked the government if the government could do some research and get some data on this to find out why. Why is it that the sales of four-wheelers in India has not grown in 10 years? It has remained the same between 27 and 32 lakhs since 2013. The sales of two-wheelers are lower today than they were in 2017. The sales of three-wheelers are lower today than they were 15 years ago. Commercial vehicles, today sales are lower than they were 3 or 4 years ago, and they haven't risen over the last decade. So you're facing a situation where things that give you good information on the economy, whether from FMCG or from the automobile sector, is telling you that there is some problem, that India is not growing. Automobiles comprise totally 49% of the manufacturing sector. And one reason why manufacturing has dipped as part of GDP is because of the fact that automobiles has been flat or stagnant for such a long period. One other thing which is quite unusual is that the middle class, what we call the middle class in India, is not actually growing. So if you look at the number of residential properties sold in the 8 major cities, it has been flat at 3 lakh units a year for about 10 years. In the last 2 years, it has been lower than that. We can say maybe that is because of COVID. But for 10 years, they have not grown. So the number of people who buy these properties has not increased since 2013. And this is a matter of concern, because this is also one of the parts of the economy where you can get a lot of employment and a lot of GDP growth because of the associated sectors of cement, steel, the very large number of people that it employs and so on. But something is going on there that we don't really understand. But the data tells us, and there is no dispute over this data, that there is a structural and long-term problem. One last thing on this, which is that in my last book, I sort of examined 53 global indices. So this is an index. Let's say this is the Human Development Index of the World Bank, or This is the Doing Business Index of the World Bank, or this is something that is done by the United Nations. The HDI is done actually by the United Nations. On 49 out of 53 of these indices, India had fallen since 2014. So we had a particular rank in 2014, and we began slipping on 49 of these. Why? Once again, we don't know. And Niti Aayog and the government tried to engage with this 2 or 3 years ago to try and figure out why it was that we were falling and what could be done. But because the bad news kept coming, now they ignore it. And they say they either try to discredit the data, which the rest of the world accepts, or they just don't talk about it. So it will be difficult for us to solve a problem when we don't even acknowledge it. The first step towards trying to solve any problem is to accept that it actually exists. If you don't accept it exists, you will never solve it. I want to shift to 2-3 other things. In terms of what else could have been done to make the economy and the Indian state stronger, one thing was definitely the fact that a strong Hindutva ideology-minded government could have made peace with the neighbors and unified South Asia as being a trading zone, like Europe is, like Southeast Asia is. Particularly because the Hindutva ideology itself tells us that they aspire to something called Bharat Mata and what is called Akhand Bharat, which is the old undivided India. But they have made no attempt to be able to bring on side all of the neighbors we have and try and unify South Asia as one common market, where because of the advantages that we have, we would be able to sell more things. We would be able to develop our economy based on the consumers of the other countries. There is neither any thought on this, nor is there any move to be able to do this. So this I would count as one of the failures. The last thing that I want to talk about in this, before I move to the future, is the social fabric. So I spoke earlier about the fact that the BJP was unable to implement laws like Pakistan could because the structure of the constitution does not allow it, but also because there is nothing within the Hindutva ideology which will give us something radically different from what Nepal tried. We, of course, cannot even do what Nepal did because there is no Kshatriya king in India that all of us will accept and say that this is our ruler. And then who will be the Mool Purohit that he appoints, and who will be the advice of what will be the advice that these are not things that you can seriously even discuss in 2022. So we can't go there. But I should say that what they have tried to do by law reflects the exclusionary aspects of the politics as well. So we don't have any Muslim minister, we don't have any Muslim chief minister. Similarly, what they have tried to do, what the BJP has tried to do, is to exclude all bully or harass Muslims through specific criminal law. So, so the Supreme Court of India said that triple talaq delivered in one sitting was invalid. So what that means was that if a Muslim man in one sitting offered the word talaq to his wife 3 times, the marriage would remain intact and they would not be divorced. After that, the government of India in Parliament passed a law which said that the utterance of these 3 words by a Muslim male was a criminal act. But it can't be considered an offense because the offense has not actually happened because the marriage is still intact. There is no divorce. So what we have this strange situation in India where if I tell my wife talaq, the word talaq 3 times in one sitting, we are not divorced, obviously, and it is not a crime. But if a Muslim man were to be accused of saying that to his wife, they would also not be divorced, but it would be a crime. So this kind of targeting is what marks the new India in more than one law. We looked at how the Citizenship Amendment Law excluded Muslims specifically from those seeking refuge, and then Amit Shah said that it was one part of a 2-part pincer. One was the CAA and the other was the NRC, which would trap the termites, as he called them. Beef lynching as a category of violence began in 2015, according to 2 hit trackers. As a journalist who has spent many decades in the field, I can tell you that I had not heard of this category of violence, where generally a Muslim person is stopped and then accused of carrying beef and then is killed often. It began because the Prime Minister pushed for laws based on what he called the Pink Revolution in his 2014 campaign and in 2015, and then two BJP states responded in 2015. One was Haryana and the other was Maharashtra, which was then under the BJP as it is now again. And what that law said was that the burden of proof would be reversed. So in common law, which is what we follow, which is a system that all of us in South Asia follow in law, you are presumed to be innocent. And the burden of proof is on the state to prove. Why is that? Because the power is all with the state. The state controls the police, the state appoints the judges. The individual is very weak. The courts are owned by the state. So the theory of a criminal law is that there should be the burden of proving the crime has to be on the state. With the beef law, what was done by the BJP was a reversal of the burden of proof. So once you accused a Muslim or whoever else of having beef in their fridge or their van, it was for them to prove that this meat was not beef. And this has led to some strange things. So in 2019, a man in Gujarat, a Muslim man obviously, was accused by the police of serving beef at his daughter's wedding, which had happened a few days or weeks before. And the police said that they could not prove that the meat that had been eaten was beef. So the man had to prove in some way that the meat that he had served was not beef. When he could not do so, obviously, the judge sentenced him to 10 years in jail. This was reversed later by the High Court. But it has produced this kind of anomaly that we are reversing the idea that somebody is innocent till proven guilty, which applies even for murder. That in murder, if I am found with a gun in my hand that is smoking and there is a corpse next to me, it is for the police to prove that I have not, that I have killed this a person. It is not for me to disprove the police. But that is what has happened in the beef law and has also happened in the citizenship law. So in Assam, everybody was told to apply with their paperwork. Every single person in Assam was told to apply with their paperwork to see whether they could get onto the National Register of Citizens. And then about 19 lakh people were left out. Most of them were Hindus, which is what we understand from reports. And that is why that has not yet been implemented. After 2018, 7 BJP states have criminalized marriages between Hindus and Muslims. My state, the state I live in right now, Karnataka, is one of them. What that law says is that an adult woman's testimony that she converted of free volition, nobody forced her, is not acceptable as evidence. The burden of proof is reversed, and it is the man she's marrying and the family she's marrying into that has to prove to the district magistrate that they had not forced her to change her faith. We've seen what has happened in Kashmir, and I think this is something that because we have lived with it for so long, it has left the sort of headlines. But the fact is that Kashmir is the only part of India right now not under democratic rule. In fact, it's the only part of South Asia that is not under democratic rule and has not been for the last 4 years. We should know that even before the 2019 Act, the chief minister had been dismissed and it was the governor that was running things. Today, and I had done this for one of my books, I looked at who were the secretaries running the Kashmiri administration. Almost all of them come from outside. So they come from UP, they come from Bihar, they come from the south. And local Kashmiris have very little power. So not only have they lost the democratic space that they had, they are now governed more or less by people who come in from the outside. Certain laws that discriminate against them, such as the Public Safety Act. So India has a lot of laws which are called preventive detention laws. So these are laws under which there is no crime. Normally, who are the people who tend to be arrested and be jailed? Somebody who's accused of committing a crime, whether it's a murder, whether it's theft, something else. Here, there is no crime. The state thinks that there might be some problem, that's why it wants you in jail. And so this is what is called a preventive detention. In Kashmir, the law is called the Public Safety Act. You can be put in jail for 2 years, but once you come out, you can be sent back to jail. So with on some other accusation. So this is used to either scare the politicians or the civil rights activists. I should mention Varavara Rao here. And this is one way in which the state in India makes sure that there is no dissent. Lastly, on this subject, I want to say that the genie, to my mind, has escaped the bottle. That we have seen how the BJP does not have a legislative agenda that they can implement for any kind of Hindu Rashtra, except for the brutalization of minorities. None of their actions are targeted at Hindus. And we have seen the fact that economically, there is a problem that has been brewing for some time and is showing itself very strongly and will continue to do so, because not only have we not acknowledged the problem, we don't know what it is, which is why it will actually continue. That the state will continue to deny that there is an economic problem, even with joblessness being at the levels it is, even with the data from all of the major industries knocking on the doors of the government, telling them that there is a problem. Even with all of that, it is unlikely that we will change. And this exclusion of the minorities, particularly the Muslims, will actually continue because that is all they have. Now let us look at what is to be done here. What is the role of the citizen? What is the role of the individual? What is the role of civil society? I would say that the Vedika and you people are part of civil society. So civil society is that part of our country, the people, which is not in government, which is between the government and the family. So it could be schools, it could be NGOs, it could be businesses, it could be the Rotary Club, it could be the Vedika. We have some role, we have some agency in this. How can we make sure that we are able to either prevent our country from doing the wrong things or push back when we think that the wrong things are actually happening? There are three things that we can do, basically. The first one is to vote. That if we are able to ensure that those people, those parties, those ideologies that represent the constitution properly are actually implemented, that represent the rights of Telangana, that represent the rights of women, that represent the rights of minorities properly, they should be given the vote from us so that they are authorized to be able to resist what is happening to India. The second is court. This is, of course, this is very less used, but the option exists for us to move PILs, to move, and we have constitutional remedies and rights that give us the scope to be able to engage with the government and the laws as individuals and as groups. And I think that this should be used, that we should tell the courts that we think that certain laws are wrong and that we stand for the fact that they should be removed from the statute. And the third element is the protest, which is a fundamental right. So Article 19 gives us the fundamental right to peaceful assembly and to free speech. So these are fundamental rights, and a fundamental right that is defined as a right which enjoys a high degree of protection from the encroachment of the state. This is not the case in India. And if you want to hold a peaceful protest, you have to fill out a form. You have to go to the police station. You have to fill out a form. And it is the police's right to tell you whether or not you can hold that a peaceful protest or not. But it exists in the constitution. So we should use that. I think those people who have used it, whether it's the Shaheen Bagh women or whether it is the farmers, they have won very successful civil rights victories. So while CA had been passed before the Shaheen Bagh movement was launched, it has still not been implemented on the ground. And obviously on the farmers' laws side, we know that not only were the laws withdrawn, there was also an apology offered by the Prime Minister. So there is some space that exists for us to be able to engage with what is going on in India. While I do not foresee the Hindu Rashtra to be of the kind that many people think it will be, I believe that it will purely continue the exclusion that is already going on, and it will continue some of the laws that specifically target Muslims. I do not foresee anything beyond that, though this is bad enough, I should say. The combination of this attack on our pluralist values and on the economy is bad enough. I don't think that we are going to come out of it in 2047 in a way that, looking at it at this point in time, we will feel satisfied. I don't think that's going to happen. The problem is much too big in terms of the economy and perhaps in terms of politics as well. In politics, I'm slightly more hopeful. And I think that because with the failure of what was seen as a sort of theocratic state, not a theocratic state so much as a religious state in Nepal and in Pakistan, I hope that the experiment that we are holding today also ends and ends soon. The last thing I want to say before I stop, and maybe we can either have a discussion or I'll go with whatever else you have planned, is to talk about the world. Where is the world moving? So there are 2-3 things that are quite striking. The first is that we are reaching that point in human history where a large part of work, whether it is services or manufacturing, is likely to be done robotically through automation, which will require fewer people than are actually employed now. One of the reasons why we are seeing that there are no jobs in India in the manufacturing sector, and jobs have in fact fallen, is this, that the roboticization of modern assembly lines is moving at a pace where there will not be too many jobs left for humans to do over the next couple of decades. The other is that many countries, and within many countries, many people are doing very large things. So there is today a company in the US which is designing a rocket that wants to set up a colony on Mars that will take humans there and expand the human race, not just to the planet Earth, but also to Mars. And this is the sort of thing that many of the wealthier nations are doing. They are setting up satellites that can exploit the mineral wealth of asteroids, whereas the poorer nations, including India, do not have access to any of that. So that gap might become very big. And the last thing is that climate change is likely to bring the human race closer together over the next 2 or 3 decades, as we all face a problem that can only be solved if all of us work together. So I don't think that weak nations especially, and poor nations, will be able to resist the force and the wealthier nations' desire that all carbon emissions be slowed down or be stopped fully. It has already started happening in large parts of the world, including in China. And I don't think that poorer nations, including India, will be able to completely stand away and look on and do their own thing and burn coal and burn fossil fuels while the globe is warming up. And so I believe that this will bring us together as a planet, as a human race. And I foresee that the future, for this reason and for many other reasons, will be quite good. However, as I said, the next 25 years will be slightly problematic for us, both on the side of politics and on the side of the economy. I'll stop with these words. Thank you so much once again for calling me. I'm sorry once again that I could not be with you earlier, and I'm grateful to all of you who have come and have remained through my talk. Thank you.
So thank you very much, sir. You have touched upon various issues that speaks about democracy in India. It's not that only elections form as the part of democracy, but you have touched upon various aspects like economy, foreign relations, religion, social aspects that you have brought into light, focusing on every element in precise detail. You have touched upon, you have given us a hope from the darkest of the clouds. You have given us a hope that India would not be a Hindu state in actual terms, but what would be going on is this marginalization of the Islamic community, the targeting of the Islamic community you have focused upon, and it is the duty of the civil society to counter this attack on the Islamic community. And they are a part of this family, they are a part of this country, and so we have to reassure them that they are citizens of this country. So you have touched upon all these aspects, sir, and you have given us a few guidelines also as to what the civil society ought to do in its in its responsibilities. And you have rightly pointed out that courts are to be questioned. Courts are also a part of the democratic institutions, and courts are not beyond questioning. And so whatever is wrong with the laws have to be questioned. And there is a constitutional right to protest. And there is hope, sir. And you have truly cited that protests in the right path will yield good results. We have seen that in the repealing of the agri laws. We have seen it in the form of the excuses being showered by the Prime Minister of India to the farming community. And you have also cited the Shaheen Bagh protest, which is very significant. And you also pointed out very rightly that we have to see where the world is moving towards and the scientific empowerment which is needed for us. You also spoke about the climate change, which is a very important aspect. Apart from a nuclear bombing, I think the climate change is going to be a very dangerous element. So thank you very much, sir. It's really a great pleasure listening to you. And please permit us to publish the speech, whatever you have given, and for a Telugu translation also. So please allow us to publish this work, sir. And it is a great honor listening to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that any of my works, any of my books are open to be published in Telugu by whoever is actually interested. And so this need not be limited to this talk, but whatever happens.
Sir, our Hindu Rashtra is already translated into Mana Haindava Rajyam. So the next book, Modi Years, is yet to be translated, sir. I think it's in progress. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So I now request Anna.
Aragopal sir మాట్లాడినాక questions సతీష్ రెడ్డి గారు.
Okay. అన్న మీరు రిక్వెస్ట్ చేయండి, మీరు అధ్యక్షత తీసుకొని హరగోపాల్ సార్ ఇన్వైట్ చేయండి.
సార్ని వెయిట్ చేయమనండి, మీరు ఆకార్ పటేల్ గారిని మీరు చెప్పండి, వెయిట్ చేయమని.
Aakar Patel sir, I request you to stay back for the meeting for a few more minutes, sir. Professor Haragopal will be addressing the gathering, and Telugu translation will follow. A few questions, sir. Only a few questions from the audience will be taken up, sir, for you to answer. Only if you permit. If you permit.
Okay. Sir, thank you very much. Haragopal sir. Sir, మీరు స్పందించండి. Haragopal sir.
The chief guest of this evening event, Aakar Patel ji, then Tippati Yade garu, Nage garu, and friends. Pradhana samasya entante whether to speak in English or to speak in Telugu. This is always a problem when we talk to a groups like Telangana Vidyavantula Vedika. I will try both. I will just speak briefly because Aakar Patel ji has given a very exhaustive account of what has happened in the past, what is the present, and of course he ended his lecture with a very optimistic note. In fact, Aakar Patel ji himself is a standing example of a state of Indian democracy. It is a person who had the convictions all through, a person who has contributed so substantially through his journalistic writings and through his books, that a person of that standing should today face the Indian state and the way his freedom is restricted, I think is an example, is an illustration of what is happening to Indian democracy. I'll not I'll just touch one or two points because I'll speak for 10-15 minutes. The first thing is that you take Telangana as an example. I will talk of Telangana particularly because the way Telangana society has developed, the long history we have had of democratic struggles. Perhaps nowhere in the country we had a civil rights movement with which I am associated has sacrificed 6 of its members for protecting the rights of the people. It's not an ordinary sacrifice that the organization has made. Our secretary Balgopal was beaten up and he was kidnapped and whatnot. In other words, the civil liberties movement, what we have learned through civil liberties movement of Indian democracy or democracy in our part of India is that, see, when we started our entire movement, civil rights movement, we were essentially concerned with the state violence. We have been repeatedly saying that if we allow the state to exceed the limits of the law and also the constitutional mandate, it will not stop with the revolutionaries, but once in principle you agree for excessive use of force by the state, it will not stop there. This is what we have been telling the society in all our interaction with the people. We have been telling this for last 40 years. Now, when we started working in the field, people started asking that you talk of only state violence, but what about the caste violence? And particularly this question was raised after Karamchand. Now, the violence that the upper caste inflicted on the Dalits, is it the civil rights concern or not? Is it a democratic question or not? And within the civil rights movement, we had a lot of debate. Then we said, no, we have to get into Karamchand, and we all went to Karamchand. Our own lawyers fought the case. And then, came the question of gender. They started asking the question that there's so much of violence against the woman. Is it not the human rights concern? Then, when we came, then people said there is a famine in some of the districts. Is it not violence? So, in other words, the questions that were raised in the course of our movement, my own feeling is that when you work with the people, people define the agenda of the movement. Now, the entire question, therefore, is that democracy is not a formal democracy. What Noam Chomsky has been writing so extensively, about 30 books he has written. And once we invited him to University of Hyderabad, and I was talking to him, he said, America is not a democracy. It's a formal democracy. It's not a substantive democracy. Now, in other words, in India, we started with a formal democracy, and gradually we started moving towards a substantive democracy. The struggles of Adivasis, the struggles of Dalits, the struggles of women, the struggles of sub-regional, regional, issues. Several movements have come up during the post free India or post independent India. Now, if you see the essence of these movements, the essence is aspiration for democracy, dignity, equality, security, and the freedom. Freedom runs through all these movements. Now, as the aspiration for freedom started going up, we had several regional and sub-regional movements, and Telangana movement was a part of that. And in the Telangana movement, what we have seen is that at least people like us who are watching the movement very closely thought that given the joint action committees, in fact, Telangana Vidyavantal Vedika is a product of that. Given the several joint action committees and civil societal organizations, and all over Telangana, number of organizations came up, apart from the political parties. While political parties were doing their own job, but Telangana society did not believe the political parties. It thought that it should have organizations, sprang from the civil society, and therefore the range and the scale of Telangana movement So when I was writing a column, I was continuously saying that the Telangana movement is slightly different from several other regional and sub-regional movements, because this is a movement of both politically, it was, running the movement in one sense, but the civil society was running the movement. But once Telangana state has been achieved or attained, all joint action committees almost disappeared. All joint, because there was a joint action committee of journalists, joint action of doctors, joint action of engineers, joint action of academics, joint action of teachers, any number of joint action committees. What happened to these joint action committees? So people like us hoped that the joint action committees, which were so vibrant during the Telangana movement, will continue to be vibrant. That's what Dr. Jaishankar used to say. When I used to argue with him that if you want just a territorial Telangana, sir, I'm afraid, what is likely to happen. He said, no. See, in fact, our task will be more after achieving Telangana than now. This is what Dr. Jaishankar used to tell. We will have a lot of, challenges, lot of problems, and we have such a vibrant society. What happened to the joint action committees? Why they declined? Why they have become, so silent? I think that had led to the way the Telangana state is being run, the way the power is centralized, the way, the interaction between the ruling party and the people lost. And, the political power, they don't even meet the people. They don't even interact with the people. Now, why did it happen? I think the civil society somewhere has given up the task it has taken up as a part of Telangana struggle. Now, therefore, if you consider democracy, if you want a substantive democracy, then it is society, it is civil society. It is the democratic organizations within the society having a lot of check on the state power and the arbitrary power of the state. Now, I think that is where today suddenly we find Telangana moving towards more authoritarianism. And one of the senior police officers, when I met him, and when I said that why we have all fought for Telangana and the same police culture and the same violations of the rights, then that police officer said, when you fought for Telangana, did you fight for changing the police culture? Did you fight against the repressive laws? Did you ask for new laws in Telangana? You didn't do. So once you got Telangana, you got the same culture, same police. Why do you expect that we change on our own? But there is a point what he's saying, that during the movement, I think some of the questions which we ought to have raised, for example, we had a composite culture. Ganga Jamuna, Jaishankar used to mention very frequently. The Muslim and Hindus, the way, the harmony, the way they lived, and from Magdum downwards, we have a lot of sacrifices of the Muslims, both in the Telangana armed struggle and later, and in other words, this harmony between these two communities is a strength of Telangana. But today, see, we are all afraid that what is likely to happen. But already the middle class of Hyderabad is undergoing a change. And sometimes when I talk to people, if there is a flats, 60 flats, a friend of mine lives, only one Muslim family is there, all 50 have pressurized them. And finally, they sold away and left the flat. This happened in Hyderabad. This is something which becomes very difficult to accept as to what has happened to the long traditions of Telangana culture. So therefore, the democracy is, apart from formal democracy, constitutional framework, elections, how the relations between human beings are mediated in everyday life, because it's a way of life. Democracy is a way of life. If it's a way of life, then how do I interact with others? How do I, respect the diversity, the plurality, the religions, the culture? This is very important. Of course, since I was teaching for a long time the political economy, I always thought that the model of development, Aakar Patel ji would realize that the democracy started getting into deeper and deeper crises. More after, although in 75 we had a shock, but 77 anyway Indian people threw away, the autocratic rule, and they have restored democracy in some form. But from 1980s, when we opted for a global model, which we have touched in the course of your lecture, and the global capital, then this corporate here also needed feudal ideology, because if inequalities increase and social justice is completely ignored, now the rulers know that if these things are neglected, they know what is likely to happen. Now, therefore, I think that culture from 1990s, you can see the role of culture, Rath Yatra and because now they have drawn culture into politics. Gandhi said that religion should get into politics to give ethical values. But now they have taken politics into religion. And with the result, the whole ethical standards, ethical values, that is one major problem. And to protect or to defend the corporate, what Chomsky says in his book is American democracy, a corporate democracy. And gradually we are moving toward the, faster, corporatization. And in the process, I think these inequalities cannot be sustained, in a very democratic framework. If a liberal democracy, the constitutional value, because Dr. Ambedkar was very clear that liberty, equality, and justice, fraternity, they're all interlinked. So it is very difficult for the ruling class to defend the model unless the liberal democratic values for which we fought during the freedom struggle are somewhere, constructed or somewhere they are restrained. And that's the reason why dissent today is not tolerated. Otherwise, Jawaharlal Nehru was very happy when somebody criticized him, somebody attacked him, and somebody was telling that Shankar, who was a cartoonist, I believe one day suddenly Nehru invited him and said, Shankar, you draw a little more critical cartoons about me because I'm likely to deviate. So in other words, a liberal attitude with which we started gradually ended up in a situation where even talking about the government or saying something about the government has become anti-national. And this, I think, change also has taken place partly because the way the development model is unfolding. I think this model and democracy, fraternity, and protest, what you were saying, they have a tension, they have a problem. There is a tension. But that doesn't mean I'm a pessimist. But optimistically speaking, the farmers movement, then CAA movement, citizenship movement, and the students, movements that are taking place all over India. Now, farmers movement gave a lot of relief. What you said about protests, it gave a lot of relief to us that it's possible. It's possible for people to fight against certain laws. And even this government, which normally would not, budge, also had to at least take back the laws, which, they passed. So I think my own feeling is that Telangana Vidyavantuల Vedika has to continuously work for a democracy where we make the civil society alert. And continuously we have to interact with the people, mobilize the people, and keep on telling them that what are the risks involved in the present political culture. And somewhere the democracy, which is the most civilized form of government that human society invented, still we are in the evolution, but democracy is one of the greatest contributions of civilization. But if what Aakar Patel ji said about Pakistan, see, it collapsed. Although they got Pakistan on base of religion, but religion couldn't keep the people united. So there are other factors other than religion. Through religion, you can't, that's the best example is the Pakistan. So I think we have to keep these factors in mind. And organizations like Telangana Vidyamantala Vedika has a historical task of building a democratic, at least in this part of India, a democratic culture, so that we can be an example to the rest of India that how democracy can survive although we are a small part of India, but still I think we should not abandon the project of Telangana state movement because we got Telangana. We have a greater task today than perhaps before, if we want to live in a democratic and civilized society. I stop here, and of course, I thank Aakar Patel ji for taking time out and coming and addressing this Telangana Vidyamantala Vedika. Sir, you must have seen they have put 100 as a ceiling, 100 crossed in the very beginning. Number of people, even one of the editors of a leading Telugu paper, he had a problem in entering, and I think these people provided some space. So your popularity has gone up thanks to the government and the agencies of state. Thank you, sir. And thanks, Nagay Garu, Tarvata Yaday Garu, for giving me this opportunity of saying few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. మీరు తెలుగు 5 నిమిషాలు చేస్తే క్వశ్చన్లు వస్తాయి, ప్లీజ్.
మీరు అడ్డం వస్తుంది, అసలు మీ బొమ్మ సరిగ్గా రావడం లేదు. మీ కెమెరా మీరు హారిజాంటల్ కనిపిస్తుంది. కరెక్ట్ నౌ.
ఓకే. థ్యాంక్ యూ సార్. థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్ వేణుగోపాల్ సార్. సతీష్ రెడ్డి సార్ తెలుగు చేయండి, క్వశ్చన్స్ అడుగుదాం. ఆకార్ పటేల్ గారు ఉన్నారు.
Naveen bhai, can you unmute Satish Bairedi? Satish Bairedi. Satish bhai, you can speak.
వినిపిస్తుందా?
Yes, you're audible.
ఓకే. మిత్రులారా, నేను అంతకు ముందుకు జరిగినటువంటి చర్చలో పాల్గొనలేకపోయాను. ఈ 75 ఏళ్ల తర్వాత భారతదేశానికి సంబంధించినటువంటి మొత్తం చరిత్రలో లేదా ఇప్పుడున్నటువంటి కాలంలో నిలబడి చూసినప్పుడు ఇవాళటి రాజ్యాంగం ప్రకారము ఈ దేశ బహుళత్వము లౌకికత్వాన్ని ఈ దేశ రాజ్యాంగం ప్రబోధించింది. ప్రజలు వాళ్ళ భాషలు, వాళ్ళ కులాలు, వాళ్ళ కట్టుబాట్లు ఏవైనప్పటికీ కూడా వాళ్ళెప్పుడూ కలిసే ఉన్నారు. మొట్టమొదటగా మనము బీజేపీ చెప్తున్నటువంటి హిందుత్వ సిద్ధాంతాన్ని ఎట్లా అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి, అది మనల్ని ఎక్కడికి తీసుకెళ్తుంది, ఏ ప్రాతిపదికల మీద వాటిని నిర్మించడానికి వాళ్ళు ప్రయత్నం చేస్తున్నారు అనేది అర్థం చేసుకోవడానికంటే ముందు కాస్త పొరుగు రాజ్యాలైనటువంటి నేపాల్, పాకిస్తాన్లకు సంబంధించినటువంటి అంశాలను కూడా కాస్త అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి. పాకిస్తాను ఒక హిందూ రాష్ట్రంగా, నేపాల్ ఒక హిందూ రాష్ట్రంగా ఉండేది. దాని కార్యనిర్వాహక అధ్యక్షుడు క్షత్రియ కులానికి సంబంధించిన వాడై ఉండాలి, ఆయనకు సలహాదారులుగా బ్రాహ్మణులు ఉండాలి అనేటటువంటి ఒక మనుస్మృతి ఆధారంగా ఆ రాజ్య వ్యవస్థ నడిచింది. క్షత్రియులు పాలిస్తారు, క్షత్రియులు చెప్పినటువంటి పాలనా వ్యవస్థకు అనుగుణంగా నడుచుకోవాలి, క్షత్రియులు చేసినటువంటి శాసనాలను శూద్రులు అమలు చేయాలి, శూద్రులు పాటించాలి అనేటటువంటి ఒక సామాజిక వ్యవస్థ అక్కడ రాజ్యం ఏలింది. బ్రాహ్మణులు దానికి ఆ శాసనకర్తలకు సలహాదారులుగా ఉంటారు. మరొక దేశమైనటువంటి నేపాల్ కూడా స్వాతంత్రం తర్వాత మత ప్రాతిపదికన ఏర్పడినప్పటికీ కూడా లియాఖత్ అలీ కాలంలో కాస్త మార్పు తీసుకొచ్చేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నం జరిగింది. ఆధునిక ప్రపంచం మొత్తంగా మత ప్రాతిపదికన ఒక ప్రగతిని సాధించలేదు కాబట్టి ఇస్లాం రాజ్యాన్ని ఉన్నతీకరిస్తూనే మైనారిటీలను టార్గెట్ చేయాల్సినటువంటి అవసరం లేదు అనేటటువంటి ఒక అవగాహనతో ముందుకెళ్లే ప్రయత్నం జరిగింది. అయితే బంగ్లాదేశ్లో, ఇండియాలో బ్రిటిష్ వాళ్ళు వదిలి వెళ్ళినటువంటి చట్టాలను, మెకాలే చట్టాలను మాత్రమే ఇప్పటికీ బలంగా అమలు చేస్తూ ఉన్నారు. పాకిస్తాన్లో ముస్లింల జీవితాలను, ఇస్లామిక్ సమాజాలని మెరుగుపరచడానికి ప్రయత్నం చేస్తూనే మైనారిటీలను పూర్తిగా ఎక్స్క్లూడ్ చేసేటటువంటి ప్రయత్నం జరగలేదు. కానీ పాలకులు మారినప్పుడల్లా కూడా ఆ ప్రయత్నం బాగానే జరిగింది. ఉదాహరణకి ఆ అయూబ్ ఖాన్ కాలంలో నాన్ ముస్లిమ్స్ ని ఆ దేశ అధ్యక్షులుగా కావడానికి వీల్లేదు అనేటటువంటి ఒక శాసనాన్ని తీసుకొచ్చారు. 70లో కూడా బుట్టే దాన్ని కొనసాగిస్తూ ఆ కొనసాగింపును, ఆ విస్తరణ ఎక్కడికి తీసుకొచ్చారంటే పాకిస్తాన్కి ప్రధానమంత్రిగా కూడా నాన్ ముస్లిం కాలేడు అనేటటువంటి ఒక శాసనాన్ని అక్కడికి తీసుకొచ్చారు. పాకిస్తాన్లో మతపరమైనటువంటి చట్టాలను ఒక నిర్బంధపూరితంగా అమలు చేసేటటువంటి ప్రయత్నం జరిగింది. ఉదాహరణకి రంజాన్ కాలంలో తప్పకుండా అందరూ ఫాస్టింగ్ చేయాలి అనేటటువంటి ఒక నిబంధనను తీసుకురావడం వల్ల అక్కడ ఉండేటటువంటి ముస్లిం పెట్టుబడిదారుల చేతుల్లో ఉండేటటువంటి రెస్టారెంట్లు తీవ్రమైనటువంటి నష్టాన్ని చవి చూశాయి. ఆ సందర్భంలో నాన్ ముస్లిమ్స్ అయినటువంటి వాళ్ళు, వేరే మతాలకు, వేరే విశ్వాసాలకు చెందినటువంటి వాళ్ళు రెస్టారెంట్లోకి వెళ్ళి తింటున్నటువంటి వాళ్ళను కూడా టార్గెట్ చేసినటువంటి పరిస్థితులు కూడా ఉండే. జకత్ను కూడా నిర్దేశించింది ఒక 2.5% వాళ్ళ ఆదాయాన్ని డిపాజిట్ చేయాలి అని చెప్పేటటువంటి ఒక ఆదేశం కూడా ఉండే. కానీ షియా దానికి అభ్యంతరం, షియా తెగకు సంబంధించినటువంటి వాళ్ళు దానికి అభ్యంతరం వ్యక్తం చేశారు. సున్నీలు ఆ జకత్ను దుర్వినియోగం చేస్తున్నాను అనేటటువంటి ఆరోపణ కూడా అప్పుడు ఉండేది. అయితే అవన్నీ కూడా కాలక్రమంలో మారుతూ వచ్చాయి. కానీ షియా చట్టాలను నిర్బంధంగా అమలు చేసేటటువంటి ప్రయత్నం కూడా ఆ కాలంలోనే జరిగింది. ఉదాహరణకి కొరడా దెబ్బలు లాంటివి చాలా తీవ్రమైనటువంటి, ఒక దొంగతనానికి చేతులు నరకడము, కాలు నరకడం అనేటటువంటి శిక్షలను వేసేటటువంటి ఒక పని మొదలు పెట్టినప్పటికీ కూడా పెద్దగా పాకిస్తాన్ చరిత్రలో అటువంటి ఉదాహరణలు మనకు కనపడవు. కానీ ఎందుకంటే పాకిస్తాను న్యాయ వ్యవస్థ యొక్క జడ్జీలు కూడా ఒక కామన్ గా ఉండేటటువంటి శిక్షణ, ఏ బ్రిటిష్ వాళ్ళు వదిలి వెళ్ళినటువంటి ఆ పద్ధతుల్లో మాత్రమే వాళ్ళు కూడా శిక్షణ ఇచ్చారు. కానీ చరిత్రలో ఎప్పుడు కూడా అట్లా జరిగినట్టుగా లేదు. అయితే ఆర్థికంగా షరియా చట్టాన్ని కూడా అక్కడ అమలు చేయడానికి ప్రయత్నం జరిగింది. ఉదాహరణకి వడ్డీని హరాముగా పిలిచేటటువంటి బ్యాంకులు అట్లా వడ్డీకి ఇవ్వడాన్ని, తీసుకోవడాన్ని నిషేధించేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నం జరిగింది. కానీ అది పూర్తిగా అమలు కాలేదు. దాన్ని పేరు మార్చి ప్రాఫిట్స్, లాభాల పేరుతోని అది అమలవుతూనే ఉంది. ముషరఫ్ వచ్చిన తర్వాత కొంత కొత్త పోకడలు పోవడానికి, కొంత కొత్త రూపంలోకి దాన్ని మార్చడానికి ఒక ప్రయత్నం చేశారు. ఉదాహరణకి స్త్రీలు రేపుకు గురైనప్పుడు మగవాళ్ళు చూస్తేనే అది రేపు, లేదా నన్ను రేపు చేశారు అనేటటువంటిది ఆమె ప్రూవ్ చేసుకోలేకపోతే ఆమెనే బాధ్యులుగా చేసేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నం కూడా జరిగింది. అయితే పాకిస్తాన్, నేపాల్లో ఒకేలా ఉన్నప్పటికీ కూడా కొంత కొత్త మార్గాన్ని అనివార్యంగా వాళ్ళు తొక్కాల్సినటువంటి పరిస్థితుల్లోకి వెళ్ళిపోయారు. మనం ఇక్కడికి వచ్చేసరికి భారతదేశానికి ప్రజలందరూ కూడా సమానమే, ప్రజలందరికీ సమానమైనటువంటి హక్కులు ఉంటాయి రాజకీయంగా, సామాజికంగా, ఆర్థికంగా అనేటటువంటి ఒక బ్రిటిష్ వారసత్వంగా వచ్చినప్పటికీ కూడా అవి అమలవటంలో తీవ్రమైనటువంటి ఇబ్బందులు ఉన్నాయి. ఇవాళ భారతదేశంలో బీజేపీ పాలకులు లేదా బీజేపీ పాలనలో ఒక బీజేపీ హిందుత్వ సిద్ధాంతాన్ని బలంగా అమలు చేయడంలో దానికి ఉండేటటువంటి ప్రాతిపదిక, దానికి ఉండేటటువంటి మూలాలన్నీ కూడా వాళ్ళకు పెద్ద టెక్స్ట్లేమి అంటే పెద్దగా పుస్తకాల ఆధారంగా కాకపోయినా కూడా వాళ్ళ ప్రధానంగా గోల్వల్కర్ లాంటి, దీన్ దయాళ్ లాంటి వాళ్ళు ఇచ్చినటువంటి స్పీచెస్ ఆధారంగానే, వాళ్ళు ఇచ్చినటువంటి ఉపన్యాసాల ఆధారం, వాళ్ళు రాసినటువంటి పుస్తకాలు పెద్దగా ఏం లేవు, వాళ్ళు చెప్పినటువంటి విషయాలు కూడా ఏం లేదు, కానీ వాళ్ళు ఇచ్చినటువంటి ఉపన్యాసాల ఆధారంగానే ఒక హిందుత్వ సిద్ధాంతాన్ని నిర్మించడానికి పాలకులు ప్రయత్నం చేస్తూ వచ్చారు. ప్రధానంగా గోల్వల్కర్ ప్రవచించింది ఏమిటి? ఈ దేశంలో ఉండేటటువంటి మైనారిటీలు, ప్రధానంగా ముస్లింలు ఈ దేశానికి శత్రువులు అనేటటువంటి ఒక బలమైనటువంటి అంశాన్ని హిందువుల మెదడులోకి చొప్పించడానికి ప్రయత్నం చేశారు. అది కాస్త వాళ్లకు ఒక బలమైనటువంటి పునాదిగా మారిపోయింది. అయితే ఈ హిందుత్వ సిద్ధాంతంలో దళితులకు, ఆదివాసీలకు చోటు లేదు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా గుర్తు చేసుకోవాలి. హిందుత్వ సిద్ధాంతంలో వాళ్ళ కోసం ఏం చేయదలిచారు, వాళ్ళ గురించి ఏం ఆలోచిస్తున్నారు అనేటటువంటి అంశం ఎక్కడా కూడా మనకు కనపడదు. అయితే వేరే దేశాల్లో, పొరుగు దేశాల్లో అమలైనట్టుగా కాకుండా ఇక్కడ ముస్లింలను ఎక్స్క్లూడ్ చేయడానికి వెలివేత కార్యక్రమం ద్వారా రకరకాల రూపాలలో ఆ ప్రయత్నం జరుగుతూ వచ్చింది. ఉదాహరణకి గత కొన్నేళ్లుగా చూస్తే బీజేపీ పాలిత రాష్ట్రాల్లో ఒక ఎమ్మెల్యే కానీ, ఒక ఎంపీ కానీ, లేదా ఒక ముఖ్యమంత్రి కానీ ముస్లిం కమ్యూనిటీ నుండి వచ్చినట్టుగా మనకి ఎక్కడ కూడా కనపడదు. అంటే రాజకీయంగా వాళ్ళకు భాగస్వామ్యం లేకుండా చేసేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నం తీవ్రంగానే జరిగింది. సో ముస్లింలను ఆ రకంగా ఎక్స్క్లూడ్ చేసేటటువంటి, అంటే వాళ్ళను రాజకీయంగా వాళ్ళకి ఎలాంటి భాగస్వామ్యం ఇవ్వకుండా చేసి వాళ్ళను రాజకీయ అధికారానికి దూరంగా పెట్టేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నం జరిగింది. అయితే నేపాల్లో మనుస్మృతి ప్రకారము ఒక పరిపాలన కొనసాగించేటటువంటి ప్రయత్నం చేసినప్పటికీ కూడా భారతదేశానికి వచ్చేసరికి అది పూర్తి స్థాయిలో సాధ్యం కాకపోవచ్చు, సాధ్యం కాదు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా బీజేపీ తొందరగానే గ్రహించింది. అయితే చట్టాల ద్వారా మరింతగా ముస్లింలను వెలివేయడానికి, మరింతగా ముస్లింలను రాజకీయంగా, ఆర్థికంగా బలోపేతం కాకుండా చూడడానికి ఒక ప్రయత్నం చేస్తూ వచ్చింది. ఇంకా బీజేపీ ప్రవచిస్తున్నటువంటి హిందుత్వ సిద్ధాంతంలో భాగంగానే దీన్ దయాళ్ ప్రవచించినటువంటి వన్ లెజిస్లేచర్, ఏక శాసన వ్యవస్థ అనేటటువంటి ఒక బలమైనటువంటి సిద్ధాంతాన్ని నమ్మినటువంటి బీజేపీ ఇవాళ ఆ దిశగా ఒక ప్రయత్నం బలంగానే చేస్తున్నది. ఒకే భారత్ మాత, అఖండ భారత్, విశిష్ట భారత్ అనేటటువంటి పేరుతో దీన్ దయాళ్ ప్రవచించినటువంటి ఫెడరలిజానికి పూర్తిగా, సమైక్య సిద్ధాంతానికి, సమైక్య వ్యవస్థకు పూర్తిగా విరుద్ధమైనటువంటి దీన్ దయాళ్ సిద్ధాంతాన్ని అమలు చేసేటటువంటి ప్రయత్నం చేస్తుంది. మరి అట్లా చేసేటటువంటి క్రమంలో భాగంగానే జిఎస్టి లాంటి ఒక చట్టాన్ని తీసుకొచ్చింది. జిఎస్టి ద్వారా రాష్ట్రాలు తీవ్రమైనటువంటి నష్టాన్ని చవిచూస్తున్నాయనేటువంటిది కూడా ఇవాళ మన అందరి అనుభవంలో ఉన్నాయి. కానీ హిందూ రాజ్యాన్ని పూర్తిగా నిర్మించడం అనేటటువంటిది సాధ్యం కాదు అనేటటువంటి అవగాహన కూడా వాళ్ళకు ఉన్నది. అయినప్పటికీ కూడా ఒక సమైక్య వ్యవస్థను ధ్వంసం చేయడం ద్వారా ఒక ఏక శాసన వ్యవస్థను నిర్మించడానికి ప్రయత్నం చేస్తూ ఉంది. అట్లా చేసేటటువంటి క్రమంలో ఉదాహరణకి ఎక్కడో ఒక తెలంగాణ మారుమూల ప్రాంతంలో ఉండేటటువంటి ఒక గ్రామానికి, ఒక పల్లెకు, లేదా కేంద్రీకృతమైనటువంటి ఒక వ్యవస్థకు మధ్య ఉండేటటువంటి సుదూరమైనటువంటి సంబంధానికి ఎట్లా అర్థం చేసుకోవాలనో కూడా మనం ప్రయత్నం చేయాలి. ఇలా ఉంటే ఇప్పుడు ఈ 75 ఏళ్ల తర్వాత ప్రధానంగా ఆర్థిక రంగంలో ఏం జరిగింది? ఒకప్పుడు ఉండేటటువంటి తలసరి ఆదాయము ఇవాళ పెరిగి ఉండవచ్చు, ఇవాళ అది రెట్టింపు అయి ఉండవచ్చు. కానీ నిజంగా అసమానతలు, నిజంగా ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభం అట్లాగే కొనసాగుతున్నది. తీవ్రమైనటువంటి ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభంలోకి ఇంకా వెళ్తూ ఉంది. 2021లో 20% మంది ప్రజలు బిస్కెట్స్ కొనుక్కునేటటువంటి పరిస్థితి ఉంటే 22లో 90% బిస్కెట్స్ కొనుక్కున్నారంటే అది అభివృద్ధి చెందినట్టు కాదు, నిజంగా వాళ్ళకి పోషకాహారం అందట్లేదు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా మనం గమనించాలి. ద్విచక్ర వాహనాలు, త్రిచక్ర వాహనాలు, 4 చక్రాల వాహనాలు ఉత్పత్తిలోను, అమ్మకంలోను పెద్దగా పెరుగుదల లేదు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా గమనించాలి. దానివల్ల ఎదురయ్యేటటువంటి సమస్య కూడా తీవ్రంగానే ఉన్నది. అయితే ఎవరు ఏ రూపంలో డేటా తీసుకొచ్చినా, ఎవరు ఏ రూపంలో సమాచారాన్ని, సర్వేని తీసుకొచ్చినా కూడా దాని విశ్వసనీయతను ప్రశ్నించటం, అది నమ్మశక్యంగా లేదని కొట్టిపాడేయటం అనేటటువంటిది బీజేపీకి, దాని ఆధ్వర్యంలో ఉండేటటువంటి, ఆ ప్రభుత్వ ఆధ్వర్యంలో ఉండేటటువంటి నీతి ఆయోగ్ కూడా ఒక అలవాటుగా మారిపోయింది. ఒక రకంగా జీడిపి తగ్గుదలనే మనం ఉదాహరణగా చూసుకోవచ్చు. చాలా కాలంగా భారతదేశంలో ఉండేటటువంటి మధ్యతరగతి కొనుగోలు శక్తి కూడా పడిపోతూ వస్తున్నది. వాళ్ళు చేసేటటువంటి అనేక రకాలైనటువంటి ఆర్థిక పరమైనటువంటి వ్యవహారాలలో కూడా తరుగుదల కనిపిస్తూ ఉన్నది. దానికి ప్రధానమైనటువంటిది వ్యవస్థాగత కారణాలు తప్ప మరొక కారణాలు కాదు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా చెప్పుకోవచ్చు. ఐక్యరాజ్య సమితికి అనుబంధంగా ఉండే సంస్థలు కావచ్చు, ప్రపంచవ్యాప్తంగా ఉండేటటువంటి సంస్థలు కావచ్చు, మనం అనేక సూచీలలో వెనకబడిపోతుంది భారతదేశం అని చెప్పినప్పటికీ కూడా దాన్ని డిస్క్రెడిట్ చేసేటటువంటి, అంటే దాన్ని నమ్మశక్యం కాదు, ఇది విశ్వసనీయత లేదు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని భారతదేశ ప్రజల ముందు ఉంచడానికి నీతి ఆయోగ్ ప్రధానంగా ప్రయత్నం చేస్తూ వచ్చింది. మిగతా ప్రపంచం అంతా మన దేశం గురించి నమ్మినప్పటికీ కూడా నీతి ఆయోగ్ భారత ప్రజలకు ఆయా సర్వేల పట్ల నమ్మకం లేకుండా చేయడానికి చాలా తీవ్రమైనటువంటి ప్రయత్నం చేస్తూనే వచ్చింది. అసలు సమస్య ఉన్నది అనేటటువంటి అంశాన్ని నీతి ఆయోగ్ లాంటి లేదా బీజేపీ ప్రభుత్వం ఒప్పుకోవడానికి సిద్ధంగా లేదు. ఎందుకంటే ఒకవేళ సమస్య ఉన్నది అని ఒప్పుకుంటే దాన్ని పరిష్కరించాల్సినటువంటి బాధ్యత కూడా దానిపైనే ఉంటది, దాని భుజస్కంధాల పైన పడుతుంది అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా దానికి తెలుసు. కాబట్టి ఆ సమస్య ఉన్నది అనేటటువంటి అంశాన్ని కూడా అంగీకరించడానికి ఒప్పుకోవడానికి బీజేపీ ప్రభుత్వము నీతి ఆయోగ్ లాంటి సంస్థలు సిద్ధంగా లేవు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా గుర్తు చేసుకోవాలి. ఒక రకంగా మన ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ బలోపేతం అవుతుందని చెప్పినప్పటికీ కూడా మన పొరుగున ఉండేటటువంటి దేశాల కంటే మన భారత ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ చాలా సంక్షోభంలో ఉన్నది, క్షీణ దశలో ఉన్నది అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా మనం అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి. హిందూ భారత్ అయినా అఖండ భారత్ అయినా కూడా విశిష్ట భారత్ అని ఏ పేర్లు చెప్పుకున్నప్పటికీ, ఏ పేర్లు పెట్టుకున్నప్పటికీ కూడా వాళ్ళు అంటున్నటువంటి ఆ అఖండ భారత్కు అనుగుణమైనటువంటి పెరుగుదల, అభివృద్ధి అనేటటువంటిది లేదు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని మనం గుర్తించవచ్చు. చూస్తున్నటువంటి అనేక సర్వేల ద్వారా మనం అర్థం చేసుకోవచ్చు. అయితే ఒక రకంగా మనం ఇప్పుడు సామాజిక పరమైనటువంటి అంశాలకు వచ్చినప్పుడు, ఒక సోషల్ ల్యాండ్స్కేప్, ఒక సామాజిక చిత్రిక దగ్గరికి వచ్చినప్పుడు బీజేపీ దాన్ని పాకిస్తాన్లో చేసినటువంటి పనులను ఇక్కడ బీజేపీ చేయడానికి, అక్కడ ఒక ఇస్లామిక్ ప్రభుత్వాలు చేసినటువంటి పనులను ఇక్కడ బీజేపీ చేయాలని అనుకున్నప్పటికీ కూడా అది పూర్తి స్థాయిలో సాధ్యం కాదు అనేటటువంటి విషయం కూడా ఇప్పటికే అర్థమైపోయింది. కాకపోతే కొంత రాడికల్ చేంజెస్ ను రకరకాల రూపాలలో, అంటే ఉదాహరణకి బ్రాహ్మణ పురోహితులు, బ్రాహ్మణ సలహాదారులు, క్షత్రియ పాలకులు అనేటటువంటి అంశాన్ని ఇంకొక రూపంలో ఇక్కడ తీసుకురావడానికి అది ప్రయత్నం చేస్తుంది. కానీ ఇవాళ ఈ ఆధునిక వ్యవస్థలో, ఈ ఆధునిక ప్రపంచంలో అది పూర్తిగా సాధ్యం కాదు అని గ్రహించటం వల్ల కొత్త రూపంలో ఏమైనా ప్రయత్నం చేసేటటువంటి అవకాశాలు ఉన్నాయి. దాంట్లో భాగంగానే ముస్లింలను ఎక్స్క్లూడ్ చేస్తూ, ముస్లింలను వెలివేస్తూ, ముస్లింలను బయట ఉంచేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నాలు ఒక పౌర చట్ట సవరణ ద్వారా రకరకాల రూపాలలో తేవడానికి ప్రయత్నం చేసింది. ఇచ్చిన తర్వాత సుప్రీంకోర్టు తీర్పు ఇచ్చిన తర్వాత ఆ ప్రయత్నం చేసింది. అంటే ఒక సాంస్కృతిక పరమైనటువంటి అంశాన్ని అర్థం చేసుకునేటటువంటి ప్రయత్నం చేయకుండానే ముస్లింలను, అంటే మొత్తంగా ముస్లిం సమాజాన్ని అది ఒక తప్పుడు వ్యవస్థ, ఆ తప్పుడు వ్యవస్థకు వీళ్ళు బాధ్యులు అనేటటువంటి, వాళ్ళని బాధ్యులుగా చూపెట్టేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నము కూడా చాలా బలంగానే చేసింది. ఉదాహరణకి పశుమాంసాన్ని భుజించటము, పశుమాంసాన్ని తినడం అనేటటువంటిది, ఒకవేళ పశుమాంసాన్ని తింటేనే లేదా దగ్గర పెట్టుకుంటూనే అది పెద్ద నేరం అని చెప్పి జర్నలిస్ట్ గా నేను ఎప్పుడైతే చూడలేదు. కానీ ఈ మధ్య కాలంలో 2014, 2019లో ప్రధానమంత్రి అనేక సందర్భాల్లో ఇచ్చినటువంటి ప్రకటనల ఆధారంగా చూసినప్పుడు పశు మాంసాన్ని తినటమే ఈ దేశంలో పెద్ద నేరమై కూర్చున్నది అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాలి. ఇవాళ ఏమైందంటే ఈ బీజేపీ పాలనలో రాజ్యము ఒక వ్యక్తి నిందితుడు అన్నప్పుడు, ఒక వ్యక్తి నేరస్తుడు అని అనుకున్నప్పుడు ఆ నేరాన్ని రుజువు చేసేటటువంటి బాధ్యత రాజ్యం పైన ఉండాల్సి పోయి తాను అమాయకుందని నిరూపించుకోవాల్సినటువంటి అగత్యము ఇవాళ పౌరుల పైనే పడింది, ఇవాళ నిందితుల పైనే పడింది. ఆ రకంగా పౌరులను కూడా తీవ్రమైనటువంటి భారానికి, తీవ్రమైనటువంటి బాధలకు గురి చేసేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నము ఇవాళ తీవ్రంగా జరుగుతుంది. అంటే రాజ్యము ఒక నిందితుణ్ణి, ఒక నేరస్తుని బోనులో నిలబెట్టి తను చేసినటువంటి ఒక నేరాన్ని రుజువు చేసేటటువంటి బాధ్యతను తప్పుకొని మొత్తంగా తను నిరపరాధిని, తను అమాయకుని అని ప్రూవ్ చేసుకోవాలని చెప్పి ఆ బాధ్యతని పౌరుల పైన పెట్టడం ద్వారా ముందుగానే శిక్షించేటటువంటి, అంటే అది నిరూపణ కాకముందుకే డబుల్ పనిష్మెంట్, అంటే 2 రకాలైనటువంటి శిక్షలు విధించేటటువంటి పద్ధతిలో వ్యవహరిస్తూ ఉన్నది. అయితే అయినప్పటికీ కూడా ఇన్ని రకాలుగా చేస్తున్నప్పుడు, అంటే ఆ మాటకు వస్తే 2018 తర్వాత 7 బీజేపీ పాలిత రాష్ట్రాల్లో హిందూ ముస్లింలు పెళ్లి చేసుకోవడమే ఒక నేరపూరితమైనటువంటి చర్యగా మారిపోయింది. వాళ్ళు తమ ఇష్టానుసారము, తమ విశ్వాసాలతో సంబంధం లేకుండా ఇద్దరు మనుషులు, ముస్లింలు, హిందువులు ఎవరైనా కూడా వాళ్ళు కలిసి ఉండడానికి, పెళ్లి చేసుకోవడానికి పరస్పర అంగీకారంతో ఉన్నప్పటికీ కూడా అది పూర్తి స్థాయిలో నేరమై కూర్చున్నది. బీజేపీ పరోక్షంగా చట్టాల రూపంలో ఎక్స్క్లూడ్ చేసేటటువంటి, ముస్లింలను ప్రధాన జనజీవన స్రవంతి నుండి వెలివేసేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నాన్ని తీవ్రం చేసింది. మొత్తంగా ఏషియన్ ఖండంలోనే లేదా భారతదేశంలోనే ప్రజాస్వామ్యం అనేది మచ్చుకైనా లేనటువంటి ప్రాంతం ఏదైనా ఉంది అని అంటే అది జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ మాత్రమే. జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లో రాష్ట్ర ప్రతిపత్తిని రద్దు చేసిన తర్వాత అక్కడ ఎటువంటి ప్రజాస్వామికమైనటువంటి సూత్రాలు గాని, ప్రజాస్వామికమైనటువంటి పద్ధతులు గాని, ప్రజాస్వామికమైనటువంటి చర్యలు లేకుండా ఉన్నాయి. ఇవాళ మొత్తంగా జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ ను పరిపాలిస్తున్నది ఎవరు అంటే జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ తో ఎలాంటి సంబంధం లేనటువంటి వాళ్ళు, జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ నుండి దూరంగా వేరే ప్రాంతాల నుండి వచ్చినటువంటి వాళ్ళు జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ ప్రజలపైన పెత్తనాన్ని చెలాయిస్తున్నారు. అత్యంత అప్రజాస్వామికమైనటువంటి వాతావరణం ఇవాళ జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లో నెలకొని ఉన్నది. వివక్షాపూరితమైనటువంటి చట్టాలు అమలవుతూ ఉన్నాయి. ప్రివెన్షన్, డిటెన్షన్, ముందస్తు అరెస్టు లాంటివి జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లో అమలైనంతగా మరి ఏ ప్రాంతంలో కూడా అమలు కావట్లేవు. అంటే మనం పాత చట్టాలే ఇవాళ తీవ్రంగా ఒక పబ్లిక్ సెక్యూరిటీ లాంటి చట్టాలను జమ్మూ కాశ్మీర్ లో విచ్చలవిడిగా అమలు చేస్తూ వేలాది మంది జైళ్లలో వేసేటటువంటి పరిస్థితి ఉన్నది. అక్కడి నుండి ఇక్కడికి వస్తే మన వరవర్రావు దగ్గరికి కూడా ఈ కేసును కూడా చూసుకుంటే వీళ్ళందరిపైన అక్రమమైనటువంటి కేసుల్ని బనాయించి అసలు అసమ్మతి అనేది ఉండకుండా చూసేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నము చాలా బలంగా బీజేపీ ప్రభుత్వము చేస్తూ ఉన్నది. బీజేపీ యొక్క శాసన యొక్క అంటే బీజేపీ యొక్క ఎజెండాను పూర్తిగా అర్థం చేసుకోకుండా మనము దాని భవిష్యత్తులో అది చేపట్టబోయేటటువంటి ఇంకా కొన్ని చర్యలను కూడా అర్థం చేసుకోలేము. అయితే మొత్తంగా తను చెప్తున్నటువంటి బీజేపీ చెప్తున్నటువంటి ఆర్థిక పరమైనటువంటి పెరుగుదల అనేటటువంటిది ఒక బుకాయింపు మాత్రమే, ఒక ప్రచారం మాత్రమే తప్ప నిజంగా ఆ ఆర్థిక ఎదుగుదలలో, ఆ దేశం యొక్క ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ పెరుగుదలలో ఎలాంటి వాళ్ళు చెప్తున్నటువంటి ప్రచారంలో ఎలాంటి వాస్తవం లేదు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాలి. కానీ వాళ్ళు చెప్తున్న ఆ ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థలో ముస్లింల యొక్క ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ, ముస్లింలు భాగస్వాములు కాకుండా చేసేటటువంటి ప్రయత్నం చాలా తీవ్రంగా జరుగుతూ ఉన్నది. సరే, ఇవన్నీ జరుగుతున్నా కూడా ఏం చేయాలి, మనం పౌరులుగా ఏం చేయాలి, బాధ్యతాయుతమైనటువంటి మనుషులుగా ఎలా వ్యవహరించాలి, ఒక పౌర వ్యవస్థ యొక్క పౌర సమాజం యొక్క పాత్ర ఏమిటి అనేటటువంటి విషయం కూడా చాలా ప్రధానమైనటువంటిది. ప్రభుత్వం మధ్య, సమాజానికి మధ్య మనము అంటే ఎన్జిఓలుగా లేదా విద్యావంతులు లాంటి వేదికలుగా, రకరకాల పౌర సంస్థలుగా మనం ఎలాంటి పాత్రను, మనం ఎలాంటి భాగస్వామ్యాన్ని రాబోయేటటువంటి ప్రమాదాన్ని ఎదుర్కోవడానికి లేదా ఇటువంటి చర్యలను, ఇటువంటి అప్రజాస్వామికమైనటువంటి లేదా ముస్లింలను లేదా మైనారిటీలను వెలివేసేటటువంటి చర్యలను ఎదుర్కోవడానికి ఎలాంటి ప్రయత్నాలు చేయగలము అనేటటువంటి ఒక 3 రకాలైనటువంటి అంటే ఒక పరిష్కారాలుగా నేను అనుకుంటున్నాను. మొదటిది, ఒక ఓటు వేయడం ద్వారా, అంటే అది స్త్రీలైనా మైనారిటీలైనా కూడా మొత్తంగా వాళ్ళు రాజ్యాంగం ఇచ్చినటువంటి ఈ ఓటింగ్ వ్యవస్థ ద్వారా కూడా అదొక పని చేయొచ్చు. అది మొదటిగా నేను భావిస్తూ ఉన్నాను. రాజ్యాంగపరమైనటువంటి రక్షణలు, కోర్టులను ఆశ్రయించడం ద్వారా, కోర్టులకు వెళ్ళడం ద్వారా ఉన్నటువంటి సమస్యలను పరిష్కరించుకోవడానికి రాజ్యాంగం ఇచ్చినటువంటి అనేక రక్షణను పరిపూర్ణంగా వినియోగించుకోవడానికి కూడా ఒక అవకాశం ఉన్నదని చెప్పి నేను అనుకుంటున్నాను. ప్రాథమిక హక్కుల రూపంలో ఉండేటటువంటివి కూడా చాలా ప్రధానం కాబట్టి ఆ ప్రాథమిక హక్కుల రూపంలో మనము బహుశా షాహీన్ బాగ్ లాంటి సిటిజన్షిప్ సవరణ, పౌరసత్వ సవరణ బిల్లుకు వ్యతిరేకంగా షాహీన్ బాగ్ లో జరిగినటువంటి ఒక గొప్ప ప్రజాస్వామికమైనటువంటి ఉద్యమమే దీనికి ఉదాహరణ అని చెప్పగలను. తర్వాత మూడొకటి, నిరసన తెలియజేసేటటువంటి, అంటే మనము ఈ అప్రజాస్వామికమైనటువంటి రాజ్యాంగ వ్యతిరేకమైనటువంటి మొత్తంగా సమాజంలో ఉండేటటువంటి విలువల్ని చిచ్చుపెట్టేటటువంటి అనేక వికృతమైనటువంటి చర్యలకు వ్యతిరేకంగా మనము ఒక నిరసన, ఒక ప్రజాస్వామికమైనటువంటి నిరసన ద్వారా మనం సాధించవచ్చు అనేటటువంటిది రైతాంగ ఉద్యమము, 1 సంవత్సరం పాటు జరిగినటువంటి రైతాంగ ఉద్యమము ఎట్లా ఒక ప్రధానమంత్రి స్వయంగా ఆ చట్టాలను మేము వెనక్కి తీసుకుంటున్నాం అనేటటువంటి ప్రకటన చేయాల్సినటువంటి అనివార్యమైనటువంటి స్థితిలోకి దేశ పరిపాలకుల్ని నెట్టివేయటం జరిగింది. అట్లా ఈ 3 పద్ధతుల ద్వారా మనము ఒక ప్రమాదాన్ని నిలువరించేటటువంటి అవకాశం అయితే ఉన్నది. వాళ్ళు చెప్తున్నటువంటి హిందూ రాష్ట్రము అనేటటువంటిది సాధ్యం కాదు. కాకపోతే రాజకీయంగా, ఆర్థికంగా ముస్లింలను, మైనారిటీలను లేదా వాళ్ళ సిద్ధాంతానికి కౌంటర్గా అటు ప్రతిగా ఉన్నటువంటి వాళ్ళను నిలువరించే లేదా వాళ్ళని అణిచివేసేటటువంటి ఒక ప్రయత్నం అయితే తప్పకుండా ఇప్పుడున్నటువంటి పాలకులు చేస్తారు. రాబోయేటటువంటి 25 సంవత్సరాలలో వాళ్ళు చెప్తున్నటువంటిది జరిగేటటువంటి అవకాశం లేదు. ఉపద్రవం ఏమీ లేకపోయినప్పటికీ కూడా మొత్తంగా బయట సమాజము, బయట ఉండేటటువంటి ఆ ప్రపంచం అంతా ముందుకెళ్తూ ఉంది. ఈ సందర్భంలో మనం మరింతగా వెనకబడేటటువంటి అవకాశం లేదు. అట్లా జరిగేటటువంటి అవకాశం అయితే అసలు లేదు. ఒక మాట ఆయన ఆర్థిక పరమైనటువంటి అంశాన్ని తడుపుతూ చాలా ప్రధానమైనటువంటి అంశాన్ని చెప్తూ, జర్మనీని కంటే భారతదేశంలోనే బిలియనీర్స్ ఎక్కువగా ఉన్నారు. జర్మనీలో మొత్తం దక్షిణాసియాలోనే, ఏషియాలోనే రిచెస్ట్, అత్యంత ధనవంతులైనటువంటి వ్యక్తులు ఉన్నారు. ఈ దేశ 60% సంపదంతా కూడా ఈ కొద్ది మంది వ్యక్తుల చేతుల్లోనే ఉండిపోయింది అనేటటువంటి అంశాన్ని, 60% ప్రజలలో తీవ్రమైనటువంటి అసమానతలు ఎట్లా ఉన్నాయనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని కూడా మనం గమనించవచ్చు. ప్రధానమంత్రి గారు ఏం చెప్తున్నారంటే 2047 కల్లా $8,800 తలసరి ఆదాయంతో అభివృద్ధి చెందినటువంటి దేశంగా మారబోతుంది అనేటటువంటి అంశాన్ని చెప్తూ ఉన్నాడు. కానీ ఇంతకు అభివృద్ధి చెందినటువంటి దేశం అంటే ఏమిటి అనేటటువంటి ఒక నిర్వచనం కానీ, ఒక స్పష్టమైనటువంటి భావన కానీ వాళ్ళ దగ్గర లేదు అనేటటువంటి విషయాన్ని గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాలి. నిజానికి కొరియా, చైనా, అమెరికా లాంటి దేశాల్లో ఇప్పుడున్నటువంటి ఆ తలసరి ఆదాయము మనకంటే అనేక రెట్లు ఎక్కువగా ఉన్నది. మరి మనం 2047 వరకు $8,800 తలసరి ఆదాయం ఉంటే ఎట్లా అభివృద్ధి చెందిన దేశంగా ఉంటుందో మనం అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి. మొత్తంగా ఈ ప్రమాదాన్ని నిలువరించడానికి ఈ 3 రూపాలలో మనం ప్రయత్నం చేయొచ్చు. ఈ అవకాశానికి ధన్యవాదాలు.
థ్యాంక్ యూ సతీష్ రెడ్డి అన్న, థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్. కృష్ణ అన్న, కొంచెం మీరు చొరవ తీసుకొని క్వశ్చన్లు అడగండి. చాలా మంది హ్యాండ్స్ రైజ్ చేసినారు. సార్కు, ఆకార్ పటేల్ సార్కు మీరు మీ లాంగ్వేజ్ మీడియం ద్వారా షేర్ చేయండి ప్లీజ్. షాజీ తోటి కూడా మాట్లాడిపిద్దాం సార్. షాజీ గోపాల్ ఉన్నాడు, వీరయ్య గారు ఉన్నారు. 1-2 క్వశ్చన్లు అడిగిన తర్వాత మాట్లాడు.
So there are only a few questions, sir. Aakar Patel ji. Ram Rao Takkalapalli. Sir, please unmute yourself and please ask your question, sir.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, that was some talk. It was really an enlightening talk to the whole nation, in fact. But I have a question. In your talk, you said that the trajectory of MSMEs have gone down. Would there be any political implications if MSMEs are going down to doing well? Since within the industrial economy, MSMEs are the largest employers. That's my question, sir.
So I didn't specifically refer to MSMEs, but in my book, I have looked at what the MSME associations have said. And they have said that because of a series of what is called shocks, this is an economic term, they have had a problem since 2016. And one reason why employment in India in the formal sector has been declining is that MSMEs have taken a hit in the last 6 years after the end of 2016. As you have said, about 90% of formal employment is in the MSME sector. So we need to, as a nation, as a government, as a people, be able to see how best it can be supported. Unfortunately, what we are doing as a state since a long time, and this is not just about this government, is that we are moving away from the idea that the government should support industry and should support employment. And we are moving towards the idea that formalization, which is the word that is used by the supporters of the government, which is the eradication of the MSME sector and the accrual of the work that they're doing towards the big corporations should actually continue. This is what is happening. So I think a lot of things, including GST collections and so on, reflect the fact that the MSME sector is losing business to the organized sector, which is not able to employ as many people as the MSME sector. So I think that this is a very serious problem, and I think it needs to be considered. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Hello. Hi. Aakar Patel ji, can you hear my voice? Yeah.
I can.
Okay. My question is, after 75 years, right, do you think the Indian parliamentary democracy as a political system, right, is able to deliver justice to the Dalits, Muslims, and Adivasis and working class? Because you, as a journalist and writer, right? You might have some deep analysis of social conditions, right? Do you think is it able to deliver, Jesse? If not, right? If this political system is a failure, what could be the alternative to this?
No, I think the system has the capacity to deliver it, but it has not been able to deliver justice to Adivasis or to Dalits or to Muslims, which is a fact. I think if you look at things like the Sachar Committee report, if you look at the human development indicators for the Adivasis, if you look at the status of Dalits in urban spaces in India, the facts are quite clear that we have not been able to deliver. Why have we not been able to deliver? Is the problem the system or the operational part, which is called culture behind the system? I would say it's the latter. There is nothing wrong with parliamentary democracy. There is nothing stopping us from giving justice to them. There's nothing stopping us from making sure that as political parties, we give adequate representation to candidates who are women, who are Adivasi, Muslim, Dalit. There's nothing stopping us as corporate companies from making sure that the employees we have a good representation of women, of Dalits, Adivasis, and of Muslims. We are not doing it. The people who control the levers of power, the upper castes, the entitled, have not done it. And I would not blame the system for it. I would say that this is sort of essentially the fact that we have failed our own people by not being able to do what we had the power to do. And then we retain the capacity to be able to change this, but we don't exercise the agency.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you very much, sir. Professor Gali Vinod Kumar, please unmute your Professor Gali Vinod Kumar garu.
Yeah.
Sir, please ask your question.
One minute, please. Thank you for giving opportunity. I thank you, Aakar Patel ji, for a nice and excellent input. My question is that what do you mean by the Hindu Rashtra actually? So my the thing is, understanding of Hindu Rashtra is Brahmanical Hindu Rashtra or Arya Hindu Rashtra is different from Adi Hindu Rashtra. So Adi Hindus there is no Varna system, there is no caste system in Adi Hindus. But only when Aryans came to India, they created all these things. So there is a difference between the Arya Hindutva and Adi Hindutva. But how can you define? I can understand this the Arya Hindu, the difference between the Arya Hindutva and Adi Hindutva. The one question is that. The another important question is there is an dangerous for this democratic nature of the state with the BJP. Definitely, they are going to introduce the Arya Hindutva instead of the democratic state in coming days. How? Because if you see the nature of the state itself, they want to change this constitution. Definitely, it maybe happens. According to my expectation, the RSS coming days in 2025. And in the 100 years of RSS, they will declare Hindu Rashtra by making a constitution, amending the constitution as a Hindustan. This is my expectation. Can you explain about this?
So I think it's a good question. What my understanding and scholars who have looked at it has been based primarily on what the RSS and the BJP themselves say. There is no other group of people who are organized who are pushing for any kind of ideology except for them. They are the ones who are the prime movers. What are they saying? They are not saying that the constitution needs to be changed because they believe, and I think rightly so, that there is sufficient space within the constitution because the constitution gives the state the power to legislate law that can exclude. So all of the exclusionary laws that we discussed earlier, whether on beef or on talaq or on citizenship or on detention, are based on the fact that they are constitutional, that the constitution does allow for what is called reasonable restriction and reasonable classification. That is why most people believe that when CAA is finally heard by the Supreme Court, if it hears it, it will actually pass it and saying and legitimize it, saying that it is actually constitutional. Do I think that they will change the constitution? I don't think that they will, and the reason is that they don't need to. What they want is the brutalization of one particular set of people, which they have successfully achieved already. They don't need to do anything else. I think that the BJP's success, and it has been successful, we should accept in Northern India and Western India for a large part, is the second largest party in Bengal, which is quite remarkable. It has been based on the fact that it has been very clear about what it wants. What it wants is, it wants political exclusion of a part of Indian society. B, it wants laws that target them, and based on that laws, there is a sort of a brutalization. And it has been successful in this. I think that to assume for me that there is something else that they want constitutionally, I have not seen that. I could be wrong, but I think that this is what, more of this is what we should expect over the next 10 years. Thanks.
Because in my view, let me continue, please. One second. So, in the name of one nation theory, they are going to, the northern culture, Aryan culture, they want to implement all over India. All over India, there is a compositive culture of the nation, now changing into a one nation theory, into a northern hegemonic, Aryan hegemonic, and Brahmin hegemonic country. The Catholic system also transferring. But best example, you take Jammu Kashmir. Jammu Kashmir has become a hub of the Brahminical state. So now they are gradually increasing, even occupying this. Even now they are targeting south. Now the south, they want to capture entirely system, and even they are going to start their hegemonic culture and hegemonic Catholic hegemony in Hyderabad. That is the reason why BJP now spreading all the one nation theory instead of the multicultural, multi-diversity country. So one nation theory, when it is applicable by amending the constitution itself only, that is Article 1. Article 1 says about the India, that is Union of States. Bharat, that is Bharat Union of States. So here they will change this word into Hindustan, a one nation. Hindustan as a one nation, one culture, one language, one region, one Brahmin community hegemony. Like this, they are promoting now. So that is there is an essentiality for them to change the constitution itself under Article 1. Then only they will succeed. Otherwise, they won't succeed. Otherwise, they won't succeed, because if this is a federal country, federal state, federal culture can be changed into a unitary state, a unitary culture, unitary hegemony. That is my understanding. That is the reason why definitely the election system, what they are General elections, they are demanding General election. Even Law Commission is approved that. Even the Election Commission of India is approved that. Then they will definitely go for General elections. They will capture the entire state, entire country in the states, and they will amend the constitution. Absolutely, that will happen after 2024. My expectation is that. Then only it is possible Hindu Rashtra. Otherwise, Hindu Rashtra never possible. This is my understanding.
Thank you, Professor Sir. Thank you so much. Kasturi Prabhakar Garu, Miryalguda. Sir Aakar Patel ji, there is a question in the chat box from Gajjala Janardhan Reddy. He says, is there any possibility to solve the land issue in Indian parliamentary democracy?
I think Nehru did have a very successful attempt, and also in Bangladesh, we've seen that there is a way in which to legislate our way out of feudalism. The question is whether, given the facts of 2022 and what we are going to face over the next decade or so, that is still a major problem. I don't know if it is. I think that it is up to the people who look at the agrarian space, including Devender ji, who you had on your, who spoke here on this forum earlier. Yes. I don't think, to my mind, that the redistribution of land is a very serious economic problem at this point in time. I could be wrong, because it's not a subject that I've looked at. I should say that the inequality of wealth is something that needs to be addressed. That even the states we look up to, who we might consider capitalist states in Western Europe and the US, are what is called welfare states, where a large part of the economy and what the state collects goes towards the welfare in terms of education, health of the citizens, which is not happening in the poorer parts of the world, especially in India. And I think that that's one thing that we should focus on, where we are cutting corporate taxes and we are adding burden onto through the indirect element of GST onto the poor. We should reverse this and make sure that the poor do not have that burden. And it's the wealthy who are right now given relief who should be made to pay for what this country spends on the rest of the population.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Prabhakar, sir, you can ask a question, please.
Sir, Aakar Patel ji, I think because of our time constraint, we are unable to take this point, I think. The central is trying to introduce the NEP, National Education Policy, to introduce their policies all over the India. I think, you know, the the CBSE syllabus already, they changed the democratic lessons and all that thing. And also all over the country, they are asking the Sanskrit has to implement as a subject, and also Mahabharata and Ramayana also they are implementing. How we have to protect these policies being a democracy?
So, sir, I think that a large part of it, the states have a lot of agency. I think that Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Bengal, all the states have significant agency which they should use, and they are using, I should say. That one reason why we don't see as vigorous kind of ideological thrust from that party in the north is because of the fact that there is resistance. There is resistance from KCR. There is actually resistance from Tamil Nadu, from Kerala, that people believe that the idea that is being imposed on them is not natural to them. And I don't, to my mind, this is not something that they will be able to achieve. The South has cultural power, the South has economic power, the South has political power, the South has agency. And I think that anybody who thinks, whether it is somebody sitting in Agra in the 17th century or somebody sitting in Delhi in the 21st century, believes that they can impose themselves on the South, it's not going to happen. It's a very diverse and large part of the world which is vibrant. And I think that to assume that you can force Telangana to do something or you can force Tamil Nadu to do something is not going to happen.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, any more questions from the participants, or we'll close the session, sir, with the vote of thanks? Saji.
Yeah. One question is, Aakar Patel, I think right now we are experiencing a economic recession, famine, drought, right? Not only in Asia, in Europe, and across, right? We are starting the journey of this. So what do you think the situation of civil rights, specifically in Indian context, right? What is this impact of, this drought and economic recession on the civil rights?
So technically, a recession would be 2 consecutive quarters of contraction, which we've not seen for like whatever reason. But it is the fact that COVID saw this bump in global trade, where all nations experience some growth in exports, which is now declining. Unfortunately, the war in Ukraine offset some of that by imposing a penalty on those nations that don't have their own fossil fuels, and then you have to pay a much higher price for petrol and diesel. But I should say that for the most part, in our part of the world, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and in India, the economy has not particularly been the focus of politics. So if you exclude Bhutto in the 70s, Bhutto wanted to Bhutto basically socialized most of the Pakistani economy, including the wheat and rice mills and fairly localized businesses. The focus has been on identity, on regionalism, on communalism. We need to shift that. We need to make sure that there is a sufficient part of the population that pushes for issues like unemployment, that pushes for issues like a good state education, which I'm told that AAP is doing in Delhi, or good primary health, which once again I'm told that some states are doing better than others. Our media, which is the part of the population that reflects public opinion, and our state, which is the part of the polity that reflects the parties, is focused too much on faith, too much on religion, too much on Pakistan, too much on things that don't matter ultimately. How do we change that? I think that is a challenge that we have to figure out. I think people like Bal Gopal and all tried very hard to be able to shift the narrative from what it is to what it should be. But we should continue to strive to make sure that the things that actually matter to us are the things that are important in democracy and in votes.